All right. Thanks, Tim Kelly, for sharing your experience and insight on pitching and what makes a strong thrower in general, but especially what makes a strong pitcher on the mound.
Mhm.
We'll welcome you here to this interview. It'll just be a quick interview for us as Angels at Bat, as well as our coaches and players who receive our equipment and trainings, to get to know you a little bit more, to get some background behind who was just talking about pitching and your experience. So we'll start off. Just can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship with baseball?
Like Max said, my name's Tim Kelly. I've been around baseball basically my entire life. I started playing when I was quite young, and I was fortunate to be a part of a family that was involved in athletics. And the city that I grew up in was just starting their youth baseball program at the time, and my dad was involved in that, and so I got to be down at the field a lot as they worked on fields and constructed buildings for our youth teams. And I always had a glove and a baseball in my hand, and got to work on my skills pretty much as I liked, and that fostered a love for the game inside. And I couldn't get enough of just being down at the field and playing games. And with that, my skills improved and came some success, and those successes afforded me some opportunities. Um, you know, in my confidence and outside of my area as well. I was fortunate to be on a few all-star teams, and kind of be with guys that are doing it at a high level. And so you get to kind of see what's out there, and what you may need to improve on. And again, that allowed me to play collegiately. So I played a few years of college baseball, and again got to play with some high level baseball players and in some pretty high level games. And with that, it kind of led me directly into coaching once I was done playing. And uh, it's really good to see. You have kids who come in, and they have some things that they need to work on, and to take them and to get them to improve, and kind of put it together. That's one of the things that kind of draws you to coaching, is to see that success in young people. And that's why I've continued with coaching as I've gotten older. And baseball will always be something that I love. And I am always going to be a student of the game. I enjoy watching you know games at night that I really don't have a rooting interest, but I just love the game itself. And there's games within the game that a baseball mind picks up on and enjoys that. And that's where baseball is for me at this point. um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that I totally understand that kind of um, that interest peaked with the mental side of the game. I think that that's something that really interests me as well when I started playing. Which I guess when did you start playing baseball? I know you mentioned that it's been a part of your life for as long as you can remember, but perhaps like when roughly did you start playing baseball, and then how did that playing career kind of shift towards coaching?
Well, I started playing when I was, a young boy, maybe 5 years old. A lot of those initial games and skills you're working on in your yard or in the street with your neighborhood friends. And then once you get into some more of the, you get into organized baseball. It was when it got warm to when it got cold, and as much baseball as we could fit in that time, that's what we were doing. Um, Got to play plenty of college baseball. You're playing a lot more games at that level than you're used to. And at some point you kind of see that it's time to take another step in your life or direction in your life. And everyone's playing career comes to an end at some point. And uh, I was fortunate enough to go right into coaching following that. So I didn't really have that void of baseball in my life for any long period of time. And I was lucky. My first coaching job was back in my hometown, and I got paid to do it. So that was pretty nice.
Yeah,
And
that,
we had a good, successful year, and I had a joy doing it. And it really, again, set the kind of the foundation for me being a long-term baseball coach.
yeah, yeah, that's absolutely. I think a lot of times people, obviously nobody wants their playing career to end in any sport. But it comes at one point, like you said, and it's all about, do you want to continue incorporating that sport into your life? And obviously you did. And I think that everyone watching this might be able to empathize with that. So this might be a not a very simple question to answer, but what do you think is maybe the most valuable skill for a baseball player?
Good question. I mean, you can always look specifically at, throwing or catching or being able to hit. But I think, these days you have to be, number one, you have to be flexible and you have to be well-rounded. I think you have to be able to do all those things. They always talk about what's a five-tool player. And you have to work at all those skills. And it's going to be tough for kids to find a spot if they're just limited to maybe one position or one skill. Coaches are looking for that versatility, for being able to put you in different spots, especially on a team when you only have maybe 12 or 15 players. You're going to have to play multiple positions. It's a long time till you get to the pros where you have bullpens and guys that are pinch hitters. That's not reality in terms of team construction. So as a young player and as a coach of maybe kids that are coming up, I would say try to do every skill to the best that you can. And obviously hitting is, probably where we put a lot of the emphasis on. And if you can hit, sometimes I always say, if you can hit, they'll find a spot for you to play, because it kind of drives the game a little bit, right? Pitching is usually has the advantage, and so those guys that hit find their way into the lineup. And maybe if they're not as skilled defensively, you can hide them in spots, out in the field. But back to your question, I do think that having the versatility and the flexibility to play multiple positions and then being able to do everything to a high level is really should be the goal of a young player today.
Yeah. What about, I guess, the same question for a baseball coach? What's the most valuable skill or attribute for a baseball coach to have?
I think when I was first starting coaching, you have your philosophy, and you sometimes maybe you try pounding, the square peg into the round hole type mentality. And as I've aged a little bit and maybe wised up, you have to be versatile. You have to be able to take your kids, identify their strengths, identify their weaknesses. And yes, you have your philosophies, but if that doesn't fit your team and your players, it's not going to work. So I just try to adjust a little bit. Yes, we'll still do the things I feel are important, but you got to take your players' strengths and weaknesses into consideration when you're kind of putting together maybe a season philosophy and how you're going to approach that season based on, the players that you have in the room. So giving them the best chance to succeed and your team the best chance to win isn't always what is in my mind in terms of how things should be done. So you have to adjust. You have to be just a little bit flexible at times, and baseball is it's not as easy as just putting those guys out there and having it all work out. And so it may work one game and it may not the next. And again, having that flexibility and I guess just the wisdom to understand that, hey, it's not always going to be like I thought, and you might need to change a little bit mid-game, mid-season, as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a common theme in what you've said so far is like flexibility and versatility, and I think that's super important because even in life as well, you can't be just good at one thing. It takes versatility, like you've mentioned, to really succeed. Yeah, so you've mentioned what the advice that you have for young players to learn a wide variety of skills and not get super specialized, but what about new coaches? I mean, maybe it's a similar sentiment, but what advice do you have for young coaches just getting started?
I think young coaches, number one, they always come in with a lot of energy, right? They want to learn, or at least they should try to. And if they could find, maybe the coach in their area that is more, seasoned, I guess you could say, and kind of latch onto those people. And you can learn a lot just by, listening to other philosophies. There's a tons of baseball philosophies out there, and yeah, it's good to know them. It's not necessarily how you might do it, but it's good experience and knowledge to have, some of that stuff as some foundational things that you can go off of. Get involved. I think that's, a lot of times our young coaches are getting involved because their kids are probably playing and now they need coaches, right? So I think that's the first step. But you can take it to the next level. You can, there's coaching clinics and things like that, videos like this. The internet's a wonderful tool to kind of just feed your brain as much as you would like with information, and just kind of just take it and store it, and use it when you think you need it. But for a young coach, I think be open-minded. Don't again, don't try to be so, this is the way that I did it, or this is the way that I had a coach that taught us to do it. Understand that kids change. The way we did it 20 years ago isn't the way that we do it anymore. And so that those things are always, should be on the forethought of your thinking as to your plan and how you're going to go about it. But get involved, be open-minded. And again, if you can find that experience, around to kind of pick their knowledge, I think that only helps in the long run.
Yeah. Along a similar note here, how would you describe your coaching style?
I was a pitcher, so if you came to one of my practices, and the things that come out of my mouth is a lot based on pitching, right? And if you pitch well, and your pitches are doing well, you're going to be competitive in games. And so it's really where I would put most of my focus for our daily practices. Sure, we work on hitting a lot, but we always start with pitching. We do that first. That's where our priority is. Our fielding, right? Most of your pitchers are going to play at secondary positions, so I want them using their best, energy that day on their pitching drills and the things that we're working on. So we always did the pitching first, just to set the tone that, hey, this is where our goals are, this is where our priority is. And then we worked on defense, and then we finished with hitting. So that's just like a basic practice overview. And so yeah, we focused on the pitching, and I think that led to a lot of my team's successes, is that we had good pitching. And like I said, if your pitcher's pitching well that day, you're going to be in the game, whether you score or not. And we see that with some of our major league teams. Pitching will keep you in the game. Hitting is the roller coaster; it goes up and it goes down. Pitching has to be that steady, consistent line. So that really is where my coaching focus is.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess maybe specifically on the mound for this next question, while pitching, what valuable or skills or lessons do you think playing or coaching baseball, especially maybe pitchers, what do you think, what valuable skills or lessons do you think that teaches?
It takes a little bit of nerve to get up on that mound and pitch. You have control. It's a team game, and yet it's one of the positions in a team sport where one person can really dominate the game. And that's one of the things that kind of lured me into being a pitcher. One thing I really enjoyed is that, yeah, my teammates, but I was on that day, I didn't really need them all that much, and you could control the game and dominate. And that, when you do that, that's a good feeling. And that brings you back the next day to practice, gets you to work harder, keep working on your skills, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it. And it's that addiction. It's the competitive fire and drive that you have. And to be a pitcher and to do that, that's a good feeling. And so it teaches you a little bit. And, I've been out there where, boy, it hasn't gone well. And so that you have to learn to deal with that too. And I think, baseball players, they got to have a short memory, and especially when things aren't going that great. And so pitching, baseball in general, I think it teaches you a lot about maybe some self-control, right? You got to have a level head about yourself. And the 4 inches, the most important 4 inches might be those between your ears. And if you can control those 4 inches, it helps a long way in being a good baseball player. And, you can take those skills into the real world.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point that you mentioned about, yeah, it's a team sport. Baseball is absolutely a team sport, but it's really only a team sport after the pitch is thrown, and that pitcher really is dictating the game. and the practice and everything really. So I think that that's such a salient point there. Um, do you have a favorite baseball player or team or coach maybe, and why is that?
Well, I live in Wisconsin, so I'd say my favorite team is the Brewers.
Yeah.
And and they've been, if you know anything about the Brewers, it's a small market team. They don't have the money that some of our other major league teams have to spend. So they have to make every player that they sign count. And so it's a struggle at times for the Brewers, but nonetheless, they're our home state team, and so I'll always be a Brewers fan first and foremost. But it is playoff season, and I love watching baseball. And if it's on, I'm watching it. And again, not maybe I wouldn't have a rooting interest in the game, but I certainly like to watch as much as I can. We have a great coach, manager Craig Counsell, and he's between his contract right now, so we're a little bit nervous as to what his future is going to hold. Hopefully, it's within within the dugout, but it might be upper level stuff. But if not, hopefully, as a Brewer in some regard. So again, Brewer fans are a little nervous as to what he's going to decide. So he's been great for the Brewers the last several years, and that's really kind of made them competitive every year. And we think he's a big part of that. So hopefully they can find a way to keep him. So in terms of baseball players, I really just like guys that do it right. They understand the history of the game. They respect the game. They respect the other team and how it should be played, and they play hard. And those are the guys that I enjoy playing. And Christian Yelich is a Brewer, and I think he's had some struggles. He went from MVP to struggling to he kind of a bounce back year this year, and just his hard work and dedication, and his motivation to get back to being a successful baseball player, I think is how you want to be. And how if you're going to have a role model, or try to emulate a player, those are kind of some of the traits and characteristics that I would look for in a player. Just works hard every day, doesn't take it for granted, and does it right. And I think, again, the history of baseball is so great that there's a lot of knowledge there that you can learn. And it kind of helps guide how you should be and how you should play. And Yelich is one of them. There's some other guys around the league, but I was fortunate to even play with some guys that just you just look at them and how they go about their daily business, and they got it all figured out. So
Yeah, I think Christian Yelich obviously he's a terrific baseball player to be even playing at that level, but especially it was a few years ago, yeah, like you mentioned, he was the best player in baseball. And then he, the following year struggled, but then he's come back and kind of reestablished himself as a really strong player. And I think that is another point to which baseball can teach good life lessons, and is always staying stable and consistent. It's not necessarily in your skills. Your skills can ebb and flow, but mentally staying with it so that when your time comes to, reestablish yourself, you'll be ready and able to do that.
Yep.
Okay, we just have a couple more questions here, just more specifically getting into pitching. What advice would you give to young pitchers just starting out?
Number one, take care of your arm. I think that's something that maybe we didn't cover, and maybe that could be a future video. We could work on or talk about arm care. And it really is, if your arm hurts, you're not going to play well, if at all, that day. So it really starts with taking care of your arm. I remember my dad sent me to a lot of camps when I was young, and it wasn't so much to become a better pitcher, but he wanted me to learn how to take care of my arm. And Nolan Ryan is one of those, legendary pitchers. And if you have a chance to watch, some things on him, he worked as hard after the game as he did during the game. And there's a part of that really is, physiologically correct, is that your body builds up things in your body, acid, right? And exercise. And he got on a stationary bicycle, and it gets that blood flow going, and it does, allow that acid to flow out of your muscles a little bit more easy, and that reduces your soreness. That, along with icing regularly, I think is long-term good for your arm. And if your arm is sore or pain, there's pain, those are red flags, right? Soreness, that's one thing. You can kind of work through that, and you're going to be sore at times, but any type of pain, sharp pain, you should not throw. And so that arm care, back to that, is really what's important to prevent some of those things. And when I was young, the Braves had the best pitching staff in Major League Baseball, and their throwing program has kind of become the standard of which a lot of programs are built off of, and they throw almost every day. And and I can send this to you, Max, there's a long toss program, right? And that builds up arm strength, and that reduces, some of that tear on your arm. And so building up the strength, yet not overusing our arm, and again, having that all work together for the sake of those kids' arms is important. So to be in tune with, number one, the program, the day-to-day throwing of those kids. Remember, young kids are going to play multiple positions, so it's not just how many pitches did they throw. Well, how many warm-up pitches were there? How many other throws did they have during the course of that day? So keeping a mindful just account of where those kids are, having a plan day to day as to what they're throwing, how much they're throwing, and then try to build arm strength while taking care of their arms. So when they're done throwing for the day, they should be running some poles back and forth, foul pole to foul pole, just to try to get that lactic acid out of there, especially on a day they pitched live. If they threw that day, pitched in a game, or had a live drill session, then that's a day they definitely should be running after, or biking, whatever they can do. And I know that's not sometimes maybe as efficient time wise, but to take that 10 to 15 minutes to just do it, long term, it's good for the arm. And then ice, you should always be icing your arm. And again, every kid's a little bit different. Some kids may not need to ice as much, but it doesn't hurt to ice your arm after throwing.
Yeah, I think, and this is, I think, something you mentioned in your presentation video, that throwing a baseball is not a natural arm movement. Our body isn't built to throw a ball like that over the shoulder really fast. So I think that what you're saying about arm care is super important for all ages, and especially people just starting, and even very well established, more skilled players in the majors, like you mentioned.
And I think if you're looking at skills, what should young kids be concerned about? No, throwing strikes. Throwing strikes. Right. That is the number. If you do not throw strikes, you're going to be in the dugout next to the coach. And so that it really is the point of that position, is to throw the ball over the plate. And, as your skills improve, then we can start to, work on corners and maybe some off-speed pitches. But you have to throw strikes. That's how you're going to get on the field.
Right. Yeah, and this segues perfectly into the final question here. You mentioned throwing different pitch types, off-speed pitches. You mentioned curveballs and sliders and changeups in your presentation. And you probably touched on this some in the presentations portion of this video, but what's your opinion on players throwing different pitch types, and especially in the context of arm care and newer players?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say I'm not going to put an age on it, but when kids are young, 4-seam fastballs, 2-seam fastballs, nothing curveball, slider, turning my hand, wrist. Kids at that age don't understand. You're talking fractions of an inch between right and wrong, and they don't understand that. And if you're not watching them as a coach, like a hawk, that's when an arm injury could occur. So when they're young, little league kids, just change their fastball grips a little bit. If you want to mess with a changeup and just throw it the same, right? Instead of a 2-finger grip, put a 3rd finger on there and throw the same pitch. You're not doing anything different with release. And so those, I encourage that stuff. And the great time to work on those things is just when you're playing catch. Yep, add another finger, put a little different pressure on this seam and that seam. And those are things that you can easily do without really putting the kid's arm at risk. When they get to be, start to get into that high school or close to that high school age, that's when you're going to start to have to kind of put in a curveball or a slider. But again, it takes the right coaching, and it takes the oversight and observation to make sure that they're doing it properly. And that, again, we don't want them to just, oh, look what I can do. I can make this ball, move this much. Well, you're not throwing it correctly. And so, yes, it's going to work that way, but your arm's not going to last and you're going to get hurt. So there definitely needs to be that coaching and that observation that comes with that. Kids are going to want to throw them earlier and earlier, and you just kind of have to temper their energy a little bit and just say, hey, well, let's try this change up first and let's see if we can work that into the games. And, again, it has to be a pitch that you can use. So it has to get to that point where you trust it enough to throw it. So starting slow, working our way up, try to temper their expectations a little bit as to when they can throw their curveball. And then again, the oversight and the observation is critical just to, again, prevent those injuries.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, as you mentioned here again, and as well as in your presentation, a great time to start trying things out is when you're just playing catch. I think I remember, I want to say that you were the person to teach me how to throw a curveball when I started getting to that age, and I just started throwing it when I was playing catch with friends and playing catch before games and things like that. And it's not going to look maybe great to start, but as you get more comfortable, like you mentioned, with proper technique and proper skills and proper safety, then you should see that growth really come.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that wraps up the interview portion of this presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed Coach Kelly's materials and hearing a bit more about him as a person and his perspectives and relationship with baseball here. Thank you, Coach Kelly, for talking with us and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Max.